United Airlines offers exclusive programs developed specifically to support the entertainment industry. We offer competitive prices on airfare for you and your crew, and customized agreements designed to meet the needs of entertainment travel for your next television, movie, or touring production. And with discounts on our select partner airlines, you can fly to just about any camera-ready location in the world. For more information on United's entertainment travel programs, visit united.business/entertainment.
Hello. So, post-strike, post-COVID, post-Netflix correction, it's no secret Hollywood is making less content and production has been down. And even as production does come back, it's not coming back to Los Angeles. FilmLA released a stat last month that was really staggering. Production this last summer in Los Angeles was actually lower than it was the summer of 2023. And if I need to remind you, the summer of 2023 was the strike. So that's a really staggering statistic. And, you know, it's not just Los Angeles losing production to places like Georgia in the United States that have great tax incentives. The whole entire United States is also seeing production go abroad increasingly. And so what we want to do with this panel is look at why that's happening, what the impact of it's been, and what can be done to reverse it. And so we got a great group. Really, these are the people you want to hear from on this topic. And so I want to welcome them up. First panelist here, we've got Sarah Westman-Liu, who is the Director of Tax Incentives and Products at Entertainment Partners. Now, so when Hollywood needs to figure out all these tax incentives and all this global, and there's lots of nuances with all of this, they turn to Sarah and Entertainment Partners, who file literally hundreds of tax claim credits for all of the studios, all of the streamers, independent productions, and foreign productions. So it's so good to have Sarah here because she could be our number expert. We also have the president of FilmLA, Paul Audley. Paul has been the president of FilmLA since 2008, and Paul has helped during that time streamline and enhance on-location filmmaking process. Welcome, Paul. And last but not least, producer Scott Budnick. He's the CEO of One Community, which is an entertainment production and co-financing company. Before that, Scott was the executive vice president at Todd Phillips' Green Hat, so he produced things like Old School, Hangover, Due Date, and now under his banner, more recent films that he's done, Just Mercy, Winner, and there's a new project, Known Us. All right, so Sarah, I want to start with you. Tax incentives they've been with us for over 2 decades now, even longer if we go back to Canada, and they've been a major part of the idea that local, state, and federal governments are giving kickbacks to lure productions. This has been part of Hollywood's budgeting and economics for a while. You know, and in 2014, California was seeing a lot of productions bleed. The tax incentive went from $100 million to $330 million in 2014, and that did stop the bleeding for a moment. But I am curious, I'm hoping you could set this up. What has happened in that 10 years? Because it really feels as if the competition, both here in the States and abroad, has really gone up on this.
Yeah, I think that's really the point, is that this is not something that's happened overnight. Like you say, it's been 10 years or even more than that. And it's not a trend that can be reversed quickly either. Basically, I think in that time, what we've seen happen is other areas, be it other states in the US or in Canada or overseas, UK, Europe, Australia, these areas have had time using their incentives to attract productions there, and they've had the time to just gradually build up their industries to the point where today there's several other viable production hubs besides just California. And of course, like you say, incentives have played a major role in that. It's not enough just to have a production incentive. There needs to be a strong industry there as well. But the incentives basically act as a stimulus that initially attracts productions to the area, and then by creating that sort of steady stream of production activity, these areas are able to build up their industries, expand their crew base, their infrastructure, their facilities. And, we're just now at a point where there's many, many options. And, it's worth noting, too, that there's not one perfect location. I think for many productions, California would still be the first choice. Obviously, for local studios and producers, there's the advantage that everything's here, there's no travel required. But it can also be more expensive to shoot in California, especially if productions are not able to access as much or sometimes any of the incentive at all. And, even with the hopefully potential increase to the cap, it's still a competitive program. So that is going to draw productions away from California to other areas such as Georgia or Canada or the UK, Australia, places that don't have any caps in their program. I think another factor obviously is that in California the incentive is limited to below the line positions. So whereas other jurisdictions allow you to qualify non-resident above the line talent for their incentives, or some or all a portion sometimes of that talent. That's not something available in California. But again, that's not the only thing. Canada does not allow non-residents, but there's other advantages, such as as soon as you cross the border, US producers are dealing with an extremely favorable exchange rate, coupled with also Canada's a lower labor cost country, so right off the bat, there could be a 20 to 30% savings in the overall production budget, and that's even before the incentive. So, there's reasons that these productions are going abroad. I think I guess I'll just say that foreign programs have the advantage of often being more stable as well. So they're built right into the tax code. So, producers, of course, prefer certainty, and they don't want to be worried that the state is going to slash the film incentive in the next budget. So, all in all, it just means that these other areas have had the opportunity to grow their industries to the point where now there's many players who are all offering different competitive alternatives.
Just recently, and since the 2014, above the line seems to be, that used to be just a little thing, but now we've got Louisiana, New Mexico, Georgia. New York now does a little above the line, in New Jersey, Illinois. That's a significant difference. Above the line, by the way, we're talking about, used to always be the below the line costs, right? Your crew, the cost of productions. Now we're talking actors and above the line costs, which is significant. And also the raising of the caps. I want to focus on one in particular, Sarah, the UK. Because that's the one that astounds me in terms of what they're allowing. Seems like UK and Canada are really the ones that are broad, that are going big, right?
Yeah, and talking about above the line again, UK is another jurisdiction that allows that, so you can have a big US star there and be qualifying them for the incentive, and residuals as well, as we were just discussing. So there's a lot of reason. UK is obviously more expensive, less favorable exchange rate, but again, great facilities and great incentives.
Yeah, I wanted the kickback thing. So many actors now are getting kickback, deferred payments and stuff, and so even ScarJo's back payment is a tax incentive in the UK, which blows my mind. And then Canada, we've got not only a favorable tax exchange rate, but we've got the federal and local provincial, which could lead up to like over 50%, right?
And some jurisdictions, even up to 70% of your local labor is going to qualify for the incentive. So when you combine all the bonuses, the provincial and the federal tax credits.
So Paul, I remember in the 2000s, early 2010s, one of the things, as a lot of these states started to step into this, they never really had the infrastructure, nor did it ever feel like there was the political will that these things were going to be there. And that seems to have changed a lot. LA always had that advantage of the infrastructure and the crew. And it really feels like, and they still do, but it feels like that gap has closed as these places have started to invest in infrastructure, right?
Yeah, when I arrived in 2008, one of the first things that I observed was that the state of California, broadly, had this image that the film industry couldn't leave because it was headquartered here, which is a really stupid way to look at the industry. Because just because the executives at Disney and Warner Brothers and Sony live here doesn't mean they produce here. And so there was this naivete and this false belief. And I started talking right away. You probably, if you've been around long enough, you know they talked about runaway production. And I changed it to ran away to force the issue that it's gone and it's going, and they have to start waking up to it's not preventing it from leaving, it actually has. And Georgia was beginning to build an infrastructure system. Our competitor was always New York. That was it. It was LA and New York, except for commercials. Chicago was big for commercials. But we began to see this spread around, and some states came and went. But Georgia, no cap, do everything you wanted, and they were paying for out of state, including our vendors. Some of them moved half of their equipment to Georgia because they were getting so much work in Georgia, and it was all part of the credit in Georgia. And California slept and allowed these places to build and build and build while it did not. And so that's what we have now, is we're facing multiple centers of production around the world, around the country, and certainly in the English-speaking world, some really excellent production centers that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago.
Scott, take us, all this depressing information here, but take us inside. You're about to make a TV show, you're about to make a movie, and obviously you're doing the budget, and there's the creative decision of where to shoot and the financial realities. In the last few years, because I know you brought a production to Winnipeg, you brought a production to New Jersey. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how this plays out in the room when you're trying to balance that financial and the creative.
I mean, obviously, from a creative point of view, it's like there's one place we can shoot The Hangover, right? That's Vegas. So creatively, we had to go to Vegas for that, and then we came back and did the rest in LA. So creatively, I just shot a movie called Nona's that we financed independently and just we prayed and then ended up selling it to Netflix just recently. But we shot that. That took place in New York and New Jersey, and it was too much to fake. It had to really be shot in
Sometimes
New York.
things do need to be shot in New York and New Jersey. And
but
Emily,
I mean, I'll give
it
you
is Emily in Paris.
I'll give you an example. I just went to Colombia for 10 days. Who's that? Colombia, raise your hand. Medellin, one of the best cities I've ever seen in the whole world. But there's like real Netflix production shooting in Colombia, and I met a director who had an action movie, and his people gave me two budgets. They had budgeted it to shoot in the United States, and it was like a $23-24 million budget. And they budgeted to shoot in Colombia, and it was on a $4.5 million budget for the same movie. The same amount of action. And so then I'm like, well, okay, that's a lot of savings. But what about crews? Do they have the crews? And guess what? They have the crews there now. They don't have the sound stages, but they have the crews. So literally, as someone who's now, I'm putting up my investors' money to finance a movie, and I'm taking all that risk, and then I pray afterwards that one of these buyers who really aren't buying anything right now will buy it so we don't lose everything. And you're telling me you have your choice of $4.5 million versus $23 million for the same movie. Pick one. There's no one in this room that's going to pick the $23 million version of the movie. And by the way, I desperately care. I do not want to go shoot anywhere else. My family, on every movie that I've made, from Road Trip that I started with Todd Phillips, Old School, Hangovers, Project X, Due Date, everything I did with Todd Phillips, almost everything we did was here. This is my family. I love these people. Every union worker on those sets, I want to be employing here. I want to work with here. I don't want to go to Winnipeg in the dead of winter and shoot our second to last movie we just made there. But when Winnipeg is giving you 70% back on local labor hiring their people, that's not something you can ignore. But I am, I know this is a bit of a doom and gloom panel, but I'm very, 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 I'm going to tell you in a bit, but I'm very optimistic about where we're heading and where the governor just announced he's about to take us.
But the impact of this has been significant, right, Paul? Just the numbers, and what have you seen in terms of the impact of what's going on?
So we're in a double impact situation. One, this pulling back of production globally. It's not local. This is a global situation of a smaller pie. And then LA is getting a smaller piece of a smaller pie. So it's like a double hit. We're still the center of television production in the world, but we went from a 24% share 2 years ago to 18% this year of a smaller pie. So you can see where that reduction of the share of production really has a serious impact locally. We're working a lot with the vendor community here. We've lost a major costume warehouse. We've lost a couple of prop houses. They can't sustain through COVID, through strikes, and now through this level of reduction of activity here. And if you've been seeing the news or hearing NPR or doing anything in the last 3 weeks, you've heard me pontificating about we're at an inflection point. It's now or never for LA to stay one of the centers of production in the world. And so I think, not unlike you, we have an opportunity coming up, but it has been devastating on folks here for what's happening. And it also, thankfully, has awakened the politicians, even locally, who have sort of slept on this as well, despite our urging. So the county's now involved in looking at new ways and potential incentives. The city has created an entertainment industry council to look at both pushing Sacramento and what can they do locally to incentivize and make things work better. So I think it often takes, it's the yin and yang, the crisis and the opportunity. So we're in crisis, it's opened up opportunities.
You know, I personally believe that as the studios are making less and less content, there's going to be a real big opportunity for indies and independent productions over the next few years, because someone's got to fill that content void. And so, Sarah, one thing I think about is, and we'll talk, I guess we'll use the number of like 20 million. One of the things that scares me about this is that it feels like the UK, Ireland, Canada have made a real play for the indie and the indie production. And I wonder if you could talk about that.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing other areas recognize that area and that it is important to incentivize it. And like you said, both the UK and Ireland just recently came out with a 40% tax credit for independent films. So these are independent, smaller budget, you know, the 20, whether it's 20 euro or 15 million pound kind of cutoffs, and there's obviously criteria to qualify for these. So yeah, it's definitely an area that we're seeing incentivized by government, as well as you know, other sectors too. We're seeing them looking to grow certain segments of their industries, such as visual effects and post-production, by introducing either a special credit or an enhancement to their credit for those areas to create that demand and grow the industry. And even Ireland's now signaling that they're looking at another VFX type enhancement as well.
Yeah, because Paul, I think for a long time, and I include myself in this, when I thought about these tax incentives, I did think about the BTL costs, you know, all the costs of productions and the crew. But it does feel like a lot of places are making plays for some of these things in the post-production, you know, the VFX. There's a lot of animation in France. And so, and especially in film production, more and more of it, the post-production part's becoming bigger and bigger. It's a bigger part of the production. And it feels like those industries are also being targeted with specific credits, right?
Yeah, and they have been, a lot of them for a while, but what's happening is as new technologies develop, and new industries are created around them, like AI coming forward, and some of these things replacing the green screen and other things. There's a lot of push, and a lot of places are very quick to react and draw. And so one of the things we've talked about is California, which, by the way, is only eligible for feature film or 1 hour television. So that's part of its problem.
We're
It's
gonna
been that
change
way.
that.
Yeah, right now, this is part of the problem. And by the way, here, if you're in India, it's 1 to 10 million. It has a separate pot of money for that group. But one of the things we have all talked about is the need to expand what the tax credit can do. And as an example, one of the things that was most early in this kind of push was things around music. Especially Eastern Europe did a lot to pull music out. And when you're in LA, that has incredible music programs and incredible orchestras and operas, they need the film industry work to sustain themselves because they're not getting paid a lot of money. And so as that music work leaves LA, it has a another effect, which is on the culture of the community as well.
Okay. So now let's talk about what can be done. And I spoke to all three of you before the news, and all three of you agreed that one thing that had to be done was the California tax incentive needed to be raised, and Governor Newsom beat us to this panel between when I talked to you and today. And so, Scott, I know you're very optimistic about what can be done. Talk about, or anybody could just kind of sum up what is on the table, but I also think that might just be a starting point in terms of what did Governor Newsom propose?
Well, his announcement was to go from 330 million to 750, and we don't know. But what we know is there's a lot of discussion happening in his office and among the California Film Commission, other offices, unions and guilds, Scott, and others. They're out there talking about what else needs to happen to make it truly competitive with the rest of the world. So the only firm thing was that in his budget, making this number 750 million, that means it still has to go through a legislative review. But the tax credit used to stand alone in California as a bill, and it took a lot of heat all the time. It's somewhat safer in the governor's budget than it was in the old way.
I want to, before I kick it to you, Scott, I want to give a little introduction here. Scott, in addition to being an incredible producer, has been very active in social justice issues. And he was the founder of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, ARC, and has also been advocating for youth in the criminal justice system, and has been part of, along those lines, passing 32 pieces of legislature. You've worked closely with Governor Newsom, and this background is not irrelevant because we've got Sacramento and we've got the government here. And I'm wondering what perspective you have on this from knowing how that process works in a way that I think most in Hollywood don't, where you're coming from.
Yeah, so I'm a weird kind of double life film producer. I started working with youth in juvenile halls and foster care homes and stuff like that, and then started hiring them on all of our movies. So there was like a dozen youth that I taught in juvenile hall that ended up becoming production assistants on The Hangover, and all are in the unions now, and we've now put over like 150 folks into the unions. So while we're doing that, like he said, we've been able to pass 32 bills in Sacramento. So there's a lot of stuff I don't know. One thing I do know is how to get shit done in Sacramento. I serve Governor Newsom and the Speaker of the Assembly on the Board of Corrections. So I'm appointed by him. And we've talked a lot over the last 3 months about what was happening to film in this state and ran away production. And he was very, I don't want to betray too much confidence, but he was very, very concerned and understood the urgency and the emergency of the moment and knew he had to do something immediately. It's pretty unprecedented for a governor before he announces his budget in January for the next year, his proposed budget, to announce something in October. That doesn't happen. The only reason he announced something he was going to announce in January in October is he realized this moment is urgent and I need to be the person that helps fix this. So he deeply, deeply, deeply cares about this business, this industry, and us and the workers of this business. The issue that has been happening recently, over the reason this tax credit has been stuck at $330 million for 10 years, it was put in place in 2014, is that the legislators in Sacramento, the 80 assembly members and the 40 senators, never get the real glimpse of what this business looks like. If I look at this crowd right here, this is a very diverse crowd of people that work, are filmmakers, are producers, or writers, or directors, workers, etc. in the business. When people came up to Sacramento to talk about the business, it was male, pale, and stale. And I've had some of my friends who are black women legislators or Latino legislators say, why don't I want to get a tax break to all these fat cat studios and all these male, pale, and stale workers that are coming up here that have like been in the union for 40 years and they don't look like my constituents, right? And that's a problem. That's a real problem at how, and that was last year. That was the reaction. No. Honestly, so this is what we need to do. This is the call to action, motherfuckers. Pay attention. So the governor's going to announce his budget in January, and he's going to put $750 million in the budget for the film tax incentive, over doubling it and taking it over New York, which is at $700 million, right? There's the ability to do more. There's a lot more that needs to happen other than just the number to make us unbelievably competitive and to have studios say, we want to stay here. We need to stay here. And by the way, most of the people that are making this movie and working on these movies want to stay with their families. They don't want to travel. So there's a lot of incentive to keep things here. How the sausage making works is that between January and June, when the budget's final, the legislature can begin to peel off that number because they would rather that money go to poor kids that don't have health insurance or something else that seems much better than the movie business, right? And much more urgent and important. And obviously, we've had a few bad budget years, so a lot has been cut the last few years that need to be restored, as well as the money that we're going to need for this business. So we need people of all ethnicities, white, black, Latino, Asian, Native, Indian, let's keep it going, to be up in Sacramento, walking the halls, talking to legislature. We're going to coordinate these meetings. We need directors, we need producers, we need actors, we need writers, we need the studios. But more than anything, if you want to win this, you need workers. You need the people that are on the ground who are having to mortgage their homes or foreclose on their homes because they can't find work right now, to be up there talking about why they joined this business, what their life was like, and what is happening right now. If you want $750 million or $900 or $1 billion or whatever we ultimately get to, and not be cut down to $450 million, that's what it needs to look like. And I'm committed to having a group up there every week, starting in January, all the way till June, till this budget's over. So we'll figure out. We'll figure out how to link up. I haven't figured out that part yet. And I'm going to figure out in the next 2 weeks how to help pay for everyone's airfare, hotel, and ground transportation in Sacramento. But it's all coming. So get ready, January.
Get on the bus. Get on the bus.
And Scott's point, just when we went from 110 to 330, it was because we changed the dynamic from studio execs and major celebrities to the unions, the guilds, the people who worked on the street level. They told their stories about leaving their homes, about getting divorced, about all the other things. So this is what makes a difference in Sacramento, not the studios. FilmLA was very quiet, but we coordinated all the other film offices to be the ones up in front and making the noise. And so we need to do that kind of thing again.
What else is on the wish list here? I mean, because, I mean, Sarah, Adam Schiff brought up federal. I don't know, could we do city? I mean, what are some of the things that, you know, obviously the money is going to help, but I mean, what other things here can be done, and what is kind of on the wish list?
Yeah, I mean, I think increasing the cap is obviously a great first step. It's a step in the right direction. More money available for more productions means more productions staying here. But it is a first step. I think there needs to be enhancements to the incentive overall. And, you know, there's many things that could be done. The one thing I'll say, though, that I think California does get right with their incentive, like you mentioned, is the criteria to qualify, because it is a competitive program. So productions are based on something called the jobs ratio, which is a complicated formula, but it's really restricting the incentive to productions that are creating the most jobs, which is exactly what it's aimed to do. And that's something that is pretty unique to California. I don't think too many other jurisdictions have something similar. So that is something that they've got right, as far as not just incentivizing the studio fat cats, if you want. It is about the jobs being here in California. Is that something that's realistic? Is this something? I mean, that's obviously brand new. I don't know enough about it yet to comment on this proposal, but it's certainly not unique. It would be unique to the US. Most other countries have something similar, so yeah.
I think the whole point of this to me, and I think if we're going to retain this business and grow it to even bigger than it's ever been, I think we need to realize that this is a human issue, right? There are human beings that are suffering because this business has ran. I'm using that tense. You're tense now. Rudy, can I call you out real quick? Is that cool? Rudy, stand up. So Rudy Reyes right here, local 728 set line technician. Rudy, I hope you don't mind that I go too much into your history, but like Rudy spent almost 30 years in prison, changed his life completely and totally, got out, mentored young people, went through a long program, couple years to get into the union, got in the union, was working nonstop. Literally one day I get a FaceTime. I'm only dropping this name for a reason, but I get a FaceTime from Kim Kardashian who says, "Oh my God, one of your guys is on my commercial set." And she looks and it's Rudy Reyes. And you know what Kim's doing around criminal justice issues, right? But like to me, the fact that Rudy right now is out of work is very personal to me because I know what he's been through in his life and I want to see him thrive. My guy Sammy over here, Sammy, raise your hand real quick. I'm putting you on. Sammy came out of the foster care system and juvenile justice system and literally a month ago just became a local 44 set dresser and is working on The Price is Right and Let's Make a Deal right now because of the great lead man on that show. But again, game shows are not covered in this credit. 30-minute sitcoms are not covered in this credit. So although Sammy might be safe because The Price is Right is probably likely to stay here, I have 10 other people on The Mandalorian right now, which is about to stop because they're moving to London after shooting in LA, right? That deeply, for the people I know and I care about, that deeply affects me. So I think if we're going to win in Sacramento, this has to be about real people.
Well, we are out of time, and I hope we are leaving this conversation with a little sense of hope. Get on the bus with Scott up to Sacramento, and thank you all three of you for joining us.